I have full confidence in Catherine and William. Their judgment is sound, their loyalty unquestioned.
There are decisions that don't just shake a family, but shake an entire dynasty. England woke up to what seemed like an ordinary morning. No one expected that just minutes later, Buckingham Palace would issue a brief announcement that would stun the entire nation. No thank yous, no explanation, no consolation whatsoever. Just a cold, impersonal statement confirming that King Charles had officially revoked Camilla's royal title. A decision seemingly only concerning a title, yet behind it lay years of accumulated conflict, silent confrontations, calculations of succession, and a painful choice between love and duty. What happened behind the closed doors of the palace? Why was the man who had defied all odds to protect Camilla the very man who signed the decree, stripping her of the title she had spent her entire life striving for? And was this merely a ceremonial decision, or the price to pay to protect the future of the entire royal family? In today's video, we'll reenact the entire story from the moment Charles signs the decree to the tense confrontations, the secrets behind the palace, and the ending where no one is truly victorious. If you enjoy cinematic royal stories with in-depth analysis of power, duty, and relationships, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next exciting episodes. And don't forget where you started watching. We'll be reading it all. And it all began in a nearly silent room. King Charles sat alone before a prepared document. On the table lay the official declaration, written in the cold language of the palace, precise, concise, and devoid of emotion. But the man before it was not just a king. He was also a husband, a man who had weathered many stormy years with Camilla. Charles read each line slowly, then he read it again. He understood perfectly well that this was no ordinary document. A single signature at the bottom of the page would change the order of his family, shake the palace machinery, and erase the public position Camilla had once believed she held forever. For seconds, the pen rested between his fingers. No advisors spoke. No one urged him on. A heavy silence fell over the room, as if even the palace walls were waiting to see what the king would choose. Then Charles put pen to paper. A brief signature, but enough to close a long chapter in Camilla's royal life. He closed the file. He said nothing. He didn't look back immediately, for from that moment, the decision no longer belonged solely to him. It would leave this room, travel through the palace corridors, and reach all of England. Shortly after, Buckingham Palace issued an official announcement. Camilla lost the right to use her royal title in public duties. Her ceremonial role was terminated. Her place in official activities in state records and in royal events was changed. But what shocked people most wasn't just the content of the announcement. It was what the announcement left unsaid. There were no accusations. There was no specific reason. Not a single statement explained what Camilla had done to lead to such a momentous decision. And it was this silence that plunged the entire nation of Britain into confusion. Because in the royal world, sometimes silence doesn't alleviate a crisis. It makes people understand that behind the palace doors, something far more serious than any explanation could have revealed. While the announcement was being made nationwide in another corner of the palace, the person directly affected by the decree had just received a carefully sealed copy. Camilla sat alone in her private drawing room when an assistant brought the document. No one spoke a word. Only after the door closed did she gently break the seal and open the pages before her. She read it from beginning to end. Not a single line was skipped. Then slowly she took off her glasses, placed them on the table, and remained silent for a few seconds. No tears, no protest, not even a hint of anger. Her face was almost expressionless, but that very calmness made the atmosphere heavier than ever. A few minutes later, Camilla asked the assistant to leave the room. When she was alone, she picked up the declaration and read it again, as if searching for a detail that might alter the meaning of the words that had just appeared before her. But the more she read, the clearer it became. This wasn't a temporary adjustment. This was the end of the public role she had spent years building. Yet while Camilla sat before the document, the palace machinery began to operate at an astonishing speed. High-ranking officials were summoned that morning. New directives were quickly sent to various departments. The official form of address for Camilla was revised. Seating arrangements for ceremonies and state banquets were updated. Administrative records were adjusted. Her royal title gradually disappeared from documents preparing for upcoming events. All of this happened almost simultaneously, without any sign of confusion or passivity. This quickly led many within the palace to realize a crucial fact. This decision was not made after a heated argument or a moment of anger. All options seem to have been prepared long before King Charles signed the decree. When the declaration was announced, the entire royal machinery was ready to operate in a completely new order. While palace officials were busily implementing the initial changes, Charles knew there was one thing he had to do himself before the whole country knew about the decision. He picked up the phone and called William. The call was unusually quiet. Charles spoke slowly, explaining that Buckingham Palace would soon issue an official statement. He wasn't trying to justify his decision, nor was he seeking the approval of his future heir to the throne. He was simply outlining what was about to happen and the consequences the family would face. On the other end of the line, William listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask any further questions while Charles was speaking. The more he listened, the more pensive William's expression became. He understood that if his father had called before the announcement was made, then this decision must have gone far beyond any ordinary family disagreement. When Charles finished, both ends of the line fell silent for a few seconds. Then William asked just one question. Has Camilla been told directly? It wasn't a question about the decree, not about power. Neither was it about the succession plan. William wanted to know if Camilla had been told the truth by Charles himself before the world knew. After that question, Charles didn't answer immediately. The silence lasted long enough for William to understand everything. He realized that this had never been just a matter of a royal title. Behind that seemingly administrative document lay a fractured family, a trust eroded by years of accumulated differences, and a relationship that even the power of a monarch could not mend. William didn't try to persuade his father to change his mind, nor did he express agreement or disagreement. As the heir, William understood that there were choices only the head of the monarchy could make, and only he could bear the full consequences. After the call ended, Charles sat alone in his study. His gaze slowly drifted to the framed photograph on his desk, capturing a moment from years ago when he and Camilla appeared together in public, their rare smiles met with acceptance. He instinctively reached out and lightly touched the edge of the frame, then silently flipped the picture face down as he heard footsteps echoing in the hallway. It was a small gesture, but sometimes a small action speaks louder than 100 explanations. Charles was not indifferent to his decision. He still hurt, still remembered the years he had weathered countless storms with Camilla. Yet in that moment, he also understood that he had made his final choice. And once the pen has put down the decree, there will be no turning back. After the brief phone call with William, the palace remained silent. But across the corridor, someone was feeling more acutely than ever that the future she once believed in was slipping away. Camilla slowly walked to the state ceremonial wardrobe. Inside hung the ceremonial dress prepared for the upcoming state banquet. Everything was still perfectly arranged as it had been for years. The dress was still in its place. The accompanying jewelry was still carefully placed in its velvet box. yet everything seemed to have lost its meaning. She gently touched the fabric of the ceremonial dress and paused silently. Not long ago, it was a symbol of her role as someone who always stood beside the king during the most important events of the nation. Now, it was merely a memory of a position she was no longer sure she would hold. While Camilla was lost in thought, William and Catherine had a private conversation. William recounted his call with his father in a somber tone. He said Charles had been incredibly resolute in his decision. Every word was decisive, as if he had considered it for a long time before making his final choice. But then William shook his head slightly. He said that what haunted him most wasn't Charles's firmness, but the fact that his father showed absolutely no sign of having just been relieved of a burden. In every word and in the silences between their conversations, William could only sense the weariness and pain that Charles was trying to hide. Catherine listened attentively. She understood that if someone who had spent years protecting Camilla would accept such a harsh decision, then things must have gone far beyond a normal family disagreement. And from there, they both began to reflect on what had happened in the previous months. Charles increasingly entrusted William with more important tasks. State receptions, representative meetings, and many symbolic royal events were gradually assigned to the heir. At the same time, Catherine appeared more frequently at major events, taking on responsibilities previously held by the older generation. For Charles, this was a necessary preparation to ensure the long-term stability of the monarchy. But from Camilla's perspective, all these changes took on a completely different meaning. Each task transferred, each more public appearance by William and Catherine made her feel increasingly pushed away from the center of the royal family. Her fear was no longer just about losing a title, but about the fear that history was being written without her presence. If what had happened before were merely subtle signs of a rift, then after the Commonwealth Remembrance Service, everything finally exploded into a confrontation that both understood would change everything. As the ceremony ended and the guests departed, Camilla did not return to her private room as usual. She quietly followed Charles into the green drawing room, where they were alone after the door closed. The atmosphere in the room became thick with silence. There were no polite greetings, no gentle opening remarks, like in previous conversations. Camilla placed a prepared document on the table in the middle of the room. It was a memorandum. She calmly explained that she needed formal assurance for the future. She wanted her title to remain unchanged in all future transition plans. She wanted her priority in ceremonies to remain unchanged. And above all, she wanted her authority in ceremonial activities protected by a clear commitment from the king himself. Charles didn't respond immediately. He pulled the memorandum toward him and slowly read each page. The room was almost silent except for the rustling of the pages. His face remained calm until his gaze settled on the end of the document. Charles read that passage again. The final content was no longer simply a desire to protect Camilla's position. The memorandum also proposed limiting William's power to reorganize the royal apparatus in any future power transition plans. At that moment, Charles understood that the conversation had moved to a completely different level. This was no longer the anxiety of a wife fearing the loss of her position after years of service. This had become a matter directly related to the order of succession and the future of the crown. Charles closed the memo, looked up at Camilla, and slowly said in a calm but cold voice, "Then you have misunderstood what the crown can promise." The words weren't spoken loudly, but they were like a door closing. Camilla stood still for a few seconds. She didn't argue further. She didn't try to persuade him. She simply picked up the file, turned, and walked out of the green drawing room, closing the door behind her. Charles remained seated. He didn't call Camilla back. Neither did he chase after her. He just looked down at the memo still lying on the table, as if understanding that from that moment on, the conflict between them could no longer be resolved by a simple conversation. A few days later, at Charles's direction, a top-secret internal review was quietly initiated, beginning a series of decisions that would completely change Camilla's fate in this story. A few days after the internal review, the atmosphere in Buckingham Palace became unusually quiet. There were no more lengthy meetings, no more constant reports being sent to the king's office. All the necessary assessments seemed complete, and Charles understood that it was time to confront the final decision with his own words. He proactively requested another meeting with Camilla. This wasn't a formal royal meeting. There was no secretary taking minutes, no constitutional advisor, no witnesses to the conversation. For the first time after days of tension, only the two of them faced each other, not in public, but in the silence of a closed room. Charles began in a calm voice. He stated that the review had reached a final conclusion, and all the advisors agreed. On one point, Camilla's demands could not be accepted if the royal family wanted to maintain a clear and stable system of succession in the future. Camilla listened attentively, but disappointment was evident on her face. She did not deny the conclusion, but argued that what she had witnessed over the past period proved that power was gradually shifting toward William. According to her, the changes in the palace apparatus were no longer simply preparations for the future, but a sign that her role was shrinking day by day. Charles did not argue. He silently removed his signet ring and placed it on the table. It was a small gesture, but it seemed to contain his entire inner turmoil. In that moment, Charles no longer wanted to speak to Camilla as a monarch. He wanted to tell the woman who had been by his side for so many years that he still hoped to bring this crisis to a peaceful end. He made one last offer. If Camilla agreed to withdraw the memorandum, accept a more limited public role, and cease interfering in William's preparations for power, everything could end without further conflict. But Camilla shook her head slightly. She said she could not accept a future where the position she had earned so much would silently disappear. In her opinion, giving in now would mean admitting that all the years spent by Charles's side were merely a phase that could be replaced at any moment. Charles closed his eyes for a moment, then slowly replied, "No title is permitted to exert pressure on the continuity of the crown." The room fell silent again. Camilla stood up and looked at Charles for a long time, as if waiting for him to change his mind. But that didn't happen. She turned and walked out of the room without saying another word. After their final private meeting, Charles understood that all possibility of compromise was almost closed. What remained was no longer the emotions between the two men, but how the palace would transform a painful decision into a legally binding document strong enough to avoid creating further crisis. In the closed-door meeting room, Charles sat with Sir Michael constitutional advisors and several high-ranking royal officials. On the table lay the draft decree, legal notes, and various options for Camilla's future. Initially, some advisors suggested only temporarily suspending her role. That seemed less damaging and would help the palace avoid a major public shock. But the more they analyzed, the more they realized the risks. If Camilla were only temporarily suspended, she could still become a center of her own influence within the royal family. On one side was Charles and his plans for William. On the other side was Camilla with her remaining connections, patronage organizations, and ceremonial power. This could create a situation where two parallel power factions, silently competing with each other, existed within the palace during the most sensitive period of the succession. Just as the discussion became tense, William entered the room. He listened to the analysis, but did not ask his father to remove Camilla. William understood that if he expressed such a desire, the entire subsequent decision could be perceived as a purge orchestrated by the heir. Therefore, he stated one thing very clearly: the final decision rested with Charles, not William, not the advisors, but the king. Just when the room seemed to have reached a conclusion, another document was presented. It was a second secret letter from Camilla's office. The letter's contents requested that Camilla retain independent control over certain patronage organizations, certain appointments, and parts of the ceremonial plans, without the heir's approval. That moment completely changed the atmosphere in the room. The issue was no longer Camilla's fear of losing her position. It had become a demand to establish her own power alongside William's succession. Charles looked down at the draft before him. The words "temporary suspension" were still on the page. He picked up his pen. No one in the room spoke. Charles crossed out the words. Then he replaced them with two colder, more decisive words that left no room for reversal. Permanent revocation. Permanent revocation. From that moment, Camilla's public royal fate was sealed. When Charles finalized his decision, the entire royal apparatus almost immediately shifted to a new mode of operation. No more debates in meeting rooms. No more drafts needing revisions. From that moment on, everything began to be implemented at near absolute speed. For Camilla, the changes didn't come all at once, but appeared step by step like pieces of a pre-arranged farewell. Her work schedule was canceled one by one. The royal seals of authority were no longer used under her name. The chair that had been reserved for Camilla at state banquets and ceremonies was quietly removed from the new seating chart. Then, even the dispatch box that had been so closely associated with her daily work was removed by palace staff on orders from the king's office. Finally, her title, the familiar forms of address used for years, were changed throughout official documents and schedules. There was no arguing, no dramatic scenes. But it was precisely this silence that made the changes feel more profound than ever. Simultaneously, the royal apparatus quickly filled the void. Princess Anne took on more responsibilities, representing the royal family at important events. Sophie was also assigned to some of the activities previously handled by Camilla. Meanwhile, Catherine appeared more frequently at public events, helping to maintain the stable image of the royal family amidst constant public questioning. Elsewhere in the palace, Charles quietly reviewed the seating chart for the upcoming state banquet. He signed his approval. Right next to his seat was an empty space. The chair that had once belonged to Camilla was no longer on the new chart. Charles gazed at the blank space for a long time before putting down his pen. He didn't ask for a change. He understood that the decision he had just made wasn't just on paper. It was now being reflected in every aspect of royal protocol. In the days that followed, Camilla remained reluctant to leave her residence. She was almost completely withdrawn from the outside world, and Charles didn't appear in public as often as usual. Finally, Charles took the initiative to meet Camilla again. This time there were no more files, no more advisors, no more debates about power. They simply spoke as two people who had been together for many years. No longer a king and a person bearing a royal title. Just a husband and wife trying to heal unfinished wounds. After that conversation, Camilla quietly agreed to withdraw the memorandum that had caused all the controversy. It's noteworthy that she didn't ask Charles to restore her title. Perhaps at that time, both understood that some decisions once made couldn't be reversed, and the only thing that could remain was respect for the years they had spent together. When the decree officially took effect, the story inside the palace was no longer a secret of the royal family. In a short time, the British media reported on it simultaneously, turning Charles's decision into a topic of discussion across the country. Public opinion quickly split into many different viewpoints. Some argued that Charles had prioritized his duties as monarch over personal feelings. They believed that protecting the stability of the crown and ensuring a clear succession process was more important than any personal relationship. But many also sympathized with Camilla. They saw a woman who had spent years by Charles's side, enduring public pressure, only to ultimately lose the very title she had sacrificed so much to obtain. Amidst this debate, William chose to remain silent for several days before making an official statement. He affirmed his absolute loyalty to Charles as king, while also expressing his appreciation for Camilla's years of service to the royal family. William took no sides, understanding that the more winners there were in this story, the more losers there would be. Meanwhile, Camilla quietly returned to her old office one last time. No more ceremonies, no more entourage, no more meetings or packed schedules. She slowly opened the drawer, taking in the royal cipher that had been so closely associated with her role for so many years. She gazed at it for a long time before gently placing it back in the drawer and closing the door. It wasn't just putting away an item, it was like closing an entire chapter in her life. Shortly afterward, Charles entered the now empty room. He saw the drawer still closed. He knew what lay inside, but he didn't open it. Perhaps because Charles understood that once a decision had been made, no memento could ever restore things to how they were. In the end, Charles retained what he believed was most important, the continuity of the crown. Camilla lost the position she had spent years building. William had a clearer path to succession, but also realized that power never equated with happiness. And perhaps that is what truly remains after all. Because decisions in a monarchy are not measured by who wins or loses, but by the price each person pays. Charles protected the future of the crown, but sacrificed a part of his personal life. Camilla lost her title, but retained her dignity. And William understood that one day he too might face the painful choice between family and responsibility. This wasn't just the end of a royal crisis, but also a reminder that behind the crowns, ceremonies, and noble titles, there are always people who have to live with decisions, and no one truly emerges as the winner. If you've watched this far, please leave a comment and let me know. Do you think Charles was right to put the future of the crown above personal feelings? Or did Camilla deserve a fairer ending after years by his side? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more royal stories told in a cinematic style and with in-depth analysis like this. Please note the content in this video is a story created for entertainment storytelling and situational analysis. The video does not claim to be a real event, nor is it intended to offend, accuse, or misrepresent any individual organization or member of the royal family in real life. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.